planning on doing tonight is basically there's a few things I want to take care of from kind of admin things. Then I want to spend some time, probably 20 minutes or so, just going through the Q&A that might have come up from the Q&A that I had you all read for the homework assignment, plus the cheat sheet which I sent out, which I think starts to raise questions, or may raise some questions, and also the client questionnaire, which some of you have done already, and I wouldn't be surprised if that itself prompts some questions, even though it's just to fill in questions on your house. You may start asking, well, why do you need that information? Why is that going to be useful? How are we going to use that? Then I'm going to switch gears, and I'm just going to teach a small section on finance, discounted cash flow analysis, which you don't need to do it. I'm just going to show you how it's done. If you can do it, great, it's all the better, but you don't need to. It's not like this is an exam where you have to recite the quadratic equation. I'm going to show you how it's done. It's actually very simple. And then I'm going to show you in the software model that I've built, which is both an energy model and a financial model. I'm going to show you things like how heat pumps work from a cash flow point of view, how insulation, triple glazed windows, and eventually solar panels, which are the most complicated because all the subsidies are time dependent. So I'm going to show you that. And then we're going to do the breakout groups for probably 20 or 30 minutes. And I'm hoping Fred is going to be on the call, but he's not here. Anyway, Fred and I have been working in the background to develop the coaching training, not the technical training, not the finance training, but the coaching training. And my thought is we'd try that next week. If that's something, let me just stand back. Is that something you would all like to do?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. So we've never done this before. We don't know how it's going to go, but if it goes well, we'll do it again. If it doesn't do well, we won't do it again. All right. So you're going to be trying some of this stuff out as we go along. So Fred and I will continue to work on that. He's going to have a homework assignment for next week. I don't know what it is yet, but he's going to have so you're not going to be doing homework from me this coming week. Okay, so let's let me do the admin things. So just give me a show of hands. How many people have booked a mass save audit with their client?
My client is Dorothea, and she has not engaged with me outside of our classes, but I did book a mass save visit for myself. I think it's virtual.
Yes, these days, yeah. Fred is coming.
Oh, good.
So has nobody else booked a mass save audit?
Well, Nicole and I have already had one.
Okay, right. That's fine. If you've got one, that's fine. Nicole?
Yep, I already have one. It's from a few years ago, so okay. I'd probably want to do a new one at some point, but it's a good starting point, and I pulled it out and I have it.
Okay, you may need to get a refreshed one just to get access to the heat load and all the other things. Most of the mass save subsidies, and by the way, I've written up a document for everyone on the subsidies. So we're going to start getting to the finance, but part of that is where do you get the cash from other people, mostly the government. So I've written up a cheat sheet on that as well, which I'll send out after this this session. But most of those subsidies come from mass save, and you can't get any of them until you've got the mass save audit. So sometimes this is just I'm not sure how useful the mass save audit is really going to be. You guys are going to be so much more sophisticated than mass save auditors by the time we're done with this, that you're probably going to find it rather pedestrian. But you can't get the subsidies without it. So you have to do it, even if you didn't learn much from it. How many of you filled out the client questionnaire? I've got one from Fred, I know.
Oh, we're supposed to send them to you?
Did you get mine, David? Did you receive mine? I sent you a copy of mine.
Yes, I did get yours, right? And Scott, you just got yours just earlier this evening. Yeah, I think Michael, I don't think I've got yours.
Right, I didn't. Sorry, I'm just a little behind. It's just been a crazy week.
I filled in most of it. Merits.
I realized I had to send it.
Just send it to me. You'll see why that is essential later on. Because when I go through some of the finance stuff, I'm going to show you the software tool that I've developed that I use with all of my clients. And I'll show you the finance side. I may just show you as in just you can see what it is. The energy modeling side. We're not really going to cover energy modeling in this session tonight, but you'll see that those inputs, all 100 of those questions feed into the spreadsheet. I need the answer to all those questions in order to be able to do the energy modeling for you. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to do the energy modeling for all of you for now, because the software is just too damn complicated for anyone else but me to use it. But the goal here is to get it to the point where it will be on a website somewhere. And you will just help your client to fill out the boxes on the website, just like you're doing in the Excel spreadsheet, and it will calculate all the results for you. So you don't need to know the software, you don't need to know the algorithms or anything. You just need to be able to put the data in, and it will give you the outputs. I'll show you some of the outputs later on today. So I did get everybody's waivers. Thank you very much. That's great. Did anyone have any concerns about signing the waivers, thinking about this from the client's point of view, that the client might be concerned? Anyone got any concerns about that? Okay.
Marginally, yes, I do.
Okay.
Because, you know, when you sign a waiver, you feel like often that there is some kind of a business transaction going on. And what we're doing is not conducting business.
Correct. That is true. Nobody's getting paid. I'm not getting paid for this. None of you are getting paid for this.
I mean, I think it's on us as the coaches, if you require the waiver sign, to be able to convince people that this is not a business transaction. It's just protecting me in case you follow through with the solar and it doesn't work out, because I'm just volunteering my time.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to describe it, Katie. It's just making sure.
David, it doesn't say waiver.
What does it say at the top?
It says Sherburne Zero Carbon Coaching Initiative.
Okay, well,
If I was presenting this to a client, I wouldn't even mention the word waiver. They're not really waiving anything.
Right.
It's more informative as to what the arrangement is with the carbon volunteers, the carbon committee.
I like that idea. It's like
It's just letting the client know what the arrangement is. That's all.
let me just say it's. I'll change it then. So it's not a waiver. It's a. I don't know. It's almost like an informed consent, right? It's like a.
Well, it's an information sheet. I mean,
information sheets, like when you go to your doctor and they have all those things you sign that are just saying, I'm aware of this and that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a very good point. I will change that, because you're right. It's not really a waiver. It's just accepting that this is a voluntary program, and we're doing this with the best of intentions. We've all been trained. This is not an amateur approach, but at the end of the day, you can't sue me if this goes wrong. That's the bottom line for you guys. You can't get any liability from doing this. You're doing this for free, for other people's benefit, not your own personal benefit. So that's a very good point, Scott. I will change that. Thank you.
David, have you had a lawyer look at it just to make sure that it really is effective in covering someone? Because I'm just kind of assuming that if someone signs it and then they are unhappy and they sue me, that would be enough to protect me. But maybe a lawyer should look at it as well.
I've not had a lawyer look at it, only because I've been the chief executive of companies for 20 years and I've done things like this 1,000 times, and this is what I use with my clients. So it's what I use to give me that kind of reassurance. But if you're concerned about it, I will get a lawyer to check it out. They'll probably want to add 15 more paragraphs.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm worried about.
But you don't want.
It's going to be.
Yeah, you might not want it, but if I was to get sued, I'd be happy that was in there.
Yeah, but it'll be.
Make the point that we're volunteering our time because we believe in the cause. We're not benefiting from anything we're advising people to do. In general, I think that pretty much, gets people on your side more in terms of not looking after trying to get even with you if something goes wrong. But you have a point. I don't know how much it costs to have it looked at by a lawyer.
I will actually. I'll tell what I'll do. Is that the Heat Smart Alliance has done exactly this, and they have a letter that their clients have to sign. It's a volunteer program, and I'll look at that.
They've had legal review of that,
and I know they had lawyers review that.
Yeah.
But let me check that.
Well, you know, there's a statement at the end of the Excel sheet that is, you know, references that. Says there's no guarantees of results, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if that's on here or not, but I think it is in some fashion. But I think that's what we're trying to communicate to the client is that we've done our homework on this and we're going to coach them on it, but ultimately it's their decision.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I will just check what the wording is for the heat smart allowance one in case there's something in there that I should have included in here. But overall, I do think it's more of a disclosure. It's saying like, you know, I'm not a paid coach. Don't treat me like one. Okay.
I like that. Treat me nicer.
Right, treat me nicer. Exactly. I like that. Treat me nice. Okay, so let's just start then. Just open up with Q&A from the stuff you did in the last week, and it can be questions going back to the start. But just one observation from me is the vast majority of the questions you've been asking so far have been around heating. There's been almost no questions about solar panels or windows or insulation. And I'm totally fine with that. If this is where your questions are coming from, that's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that we're covering all of the areas in case you've got questions in other areas. Yeah.
I have lots of questions. I just don't want to dominate the conversation.
Start us off and then we'll just go round.
Okay, let's talk about windows for a minute. The windows that you put in, David, are all triple glazed.
Yes.
Now, a triple glaze glazing, triple thick glazing, from what I know about it, is about 1 inch thick.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and that does not fit into the standard 3/4 inch glazing groove that most window manufacturers produce, right? So now you're getting into special assemblies.
Yep.
And also now you're dealing with another third of the weight. So I think the most common window on the planet is double hung.
Yep. Well,
which
on the planet, no, in New England. New England is peculiar in having hung windows.
I can tell you they're very prevalent in Chicago too. So maybe in the United States.
Yep, yep, okay.
And a double hung window is counterbalanced. And the counterbalance mechanism is not built for an additional 30%. So to find triple glazed windows that are double hungs, if that's what you'd like to stay with, or that's what you'd like to have, would be a tough thing, I believe. Now, I'm assuming that you don't have double hungs.
Correct. I've never installed a triple glazed double hung window. And in fact, I'm not sure I've even heard of one. When I've looked at triple glazed windows, they're almost all of them either a fixed panel of glass, so it's not an opening window, it's just a sheet of glass in the window. And those are very easy to change from a single or double glazed to triple glazed because there's usually just a piece of trim wood that holds that pane of glass in. You take out the trim wood, throw away the single glazed, put in the triple glazed, put back the trim wood, you're done. It's a very cheap, easy upgrade. In fact, if you have windows that don't open, or any of your clients have windows that don't open, that is by far the cheapest way to upgrade to triple glazing because you're just buying the glass. And the glass is fairly cheap. And you don't have any weight issues because it's resting on the sill frame there. If you have almost all the triple glazed windows I've ever seen are casement windows, meaning they're like a door. They're on a hinge on one side or the other. They don't move up and down, they move in and out, just like a door swings in and out. And they're like patio doors, like sliding patio doors that slide side to side, not up and down. If they're sliding side to side, the weight is not an issue because it's on a track. And the weight is borne by little wheels on ball bearings. So there's no issue with weight on a sliding patio door. On a casement, there's no issue with weight because it's on a hinge, you're not holding the weight up. So the only time would be if it is a double hung, and I agree with you, Scott, they're very common in New England. I never looked for double hung windows because we don't have any. But I don't really remember seeing them either. and the big window companies in the US like Pella, Anderson, and Marvin, I talked to all of them when I did my triple glazed windows. I talked to all of them, and for them, triple glazing was like, yeah, I think I've heard of that. Hey, Bill, we got this guy. He wants triple glazing. Can you come over here and talk to him? Like, they really didn't know what I was talking about, and I had lots of questions. I'd done my research, and they really struggled to answer my questions. And in the end, I bought my windows from a company called from Lowen, Loewen, which is in Canada. And I called them, and they said, triple glaze? Sure, we do that all the time. Because it's cold in Canada. So of course they do triple glazing all the time. So Lowen was completely familiar. They answered all my questions. They knew exactly what I was doing. And they just shipped the windows from Canada down to Dover. And all of those windows were either casement or fixed panels, or they were sliding glass patio doors. So I never came across that issue, Scott. But I think every issue you raise is correct. You've now got a lot more weight in the window. You have to have new counterbalance weights to balance it properly. And the problem with going with I think there's a much bigger problem with double hung, which is that it's very hard to seal. So they're almost always getting very drafty. And that is going to negate almost all benefit of having triple glazing. And I think for someone whose windows aren't failing, it's going to be so much better value for money for them to put a glass panel on the inside, a fit from the inside window on the inside, than taking out double hung windows to replace them with triple glazed. But that's a new one, Scott. I've never replaced a double hung.
Well, I found this fascinating article on insulated glass, and they talk a lot about the thermal properties of triple glazing and E-films and vacuum glazing. Anyway, I think you talked about the inert gas that was going in. The name of it escapes me at this point.
Argon and krypton, the two gases they use.
Yeah, but I learned that gas has now become cheaper because it's a byproduct of some material that they make for the solar panels. So the price of that has come down, but this glazing technology is in its infancy, and it's coming up fast because of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. If you go back, it's not that far back. Like, you go back to like the 1970s, and you could only get single glazed. There was no low E coatings on it, and they generally leaked like sieves. And the heat lost through a modern low E triple glazed window is 1/8, 15% of that lost by a single glazed window from the 1970s. That's how far the technology has come. And as you're saying, Scott, there's more coming, but we've already made these huge strides in windows. And if you look at all of these technologies, heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, solar panels, the biggest technology improvement has been triple glazed windows.
Well, I think the bottom line is if one of our clients has their heart set on double hung windows, they're going to be looking at double glaze, not triple glaze.
Probably. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, let's anyone else got a question? Yeah, Fred?
Just for a second. If they're looking at double glaze, the window inserts could up the ante quite a bit. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're 100% right, Fred. If you've got a double glazed, double hung window, it's still going to be drafty because they always are. But at least you've got double glazed performance. If you put a panel of glass on the inside or a sheet of plastic, you can get clear polycarbonate plastic or glass, then you've got a triple glazed window. So yes, I think it's a very good upgrade. Of the four I show in the book, the four different manufacturers, I like the one from a company called Inner Glass the best because it is actually glass. The others are all plastic. One of them is very flimsy. It's almost like that stretchy film you put in windows. It's almost like saran wrap. It's very thin, very flimsy. It does work, but it's very, very flimsy. Then there's two are made from clear plastic. One is polycarbonate, one is acrylic, and then the other one is made from glass. And the reason I like the glass better is you can put a low E coating on the glass, which you can't put on plastic. So it gives you much better insulation. It's about the same price, and the mechanism that inner glass uses to squeeze it into the window is better. It's spring loaded on the edges, whereas the others all have a rubber gasket. You just kind of squeeze it into place. So I like the inner glass one, and the guy who runs the place is really into being green and saving the planet from global warming, and he's based in Connecticut, and you can just drive down and pick up your windows, whereas if you buy them from the other companies there, in Oregon or something, it's going to cost a fortune to ship them. So everything I just said is in the book, so you don't need to write it all down. It's all there.
I have a question about the inner glass. Are those just standard window sizes, or can they do like really custom, different kind of shaped windows?
All of these companies do custom.
Hmm.
And they're all basically little job shops. It's not Marvin or Anderson or Pella. It's like a huge factory. They're little job shops where they buy in the rails, they buy in the glass, they cut them, they fit them. So you can get whatever you want. And most of them advertise that as one of their key selling points. You measure your window. One of them, it's Indo, actually sends you a little laser measurement tool, and they give you instructions to go around your window and measure the different heights and angles, and then you send it to them. You write it all down and send it back to them, and they custom fit it to your window. So, but they all have a measurement step where you have to measure the height and the width of the window. Often you measure the diagonal as well, just to tell if it's off square. And they'll make it to fit your window. So it's very custom. In fact, a guy I know did some consulting work for the church in Dover, the Dover church, and they wanted to do these window inserts for their windows. None of their windows were square. I mean, it's a 300-year-old church. Nothing is square. So they can be done for pretty much anything. Hi, Dorothea.
Thank you.
So I have a question about with window inserts. What if you want to get fresh air in your house?
Yeah, good question. So once the window insert is in the window frame from the inside, it's going to block the drafts. So, and you physically can't get through it to open the handle and open the window. So you really have to take the window insert out if you want to open the window. Now I've done it both ways. I've done it on windows that don't open and on windows that do open. Now, even the windows I've got that do open, I don't open them very often. So I'll probably go a whole year without ever opening these particular windows. These are in the third floor of our rental house. So it's not like it's in my kitchen where I might be opening the window frequently. So I think for places like that, which are a little bit more out of the way, maybe bedrooms, bathrooms, attics, and basements, I think they're a very good idea. For your living room windows, your kitchen windows, not so good an idea. But you're going to want to have breeze and air exchange if you burn something on the stove or something. So I think they're very good products for certain places, but I think most people are not going to want to have a metal frame inside their wooden frames in their living room. People do. I'm not saying people don't do that, but people do that. But I personally did not want that in the frequently used spaces in the house.
And I think that to a degree, probably 80%, well, 90% of my windows in the winter, or the summer for that matter, aren't really opened, but to let air flow in.
Yeah.
So perhaps I have a kitchen window, a bedroom window, a whatever window that doesn't have an insert that can in fact be converted to screen very quickly.
Yeah. I think in practice that's exactly how people would use these, Fred. You'd pick a couple of windows, maybe one in the kitchen, maybe one in the bathroom, maybe one in the bedroom, where you do want to have the option of opening it up to get some fresh air frequently. And the rest of them you just leave in place. So I've installed 3 of these at our house and another 4 at our rental property, and I've never taken any of them out. I just leave them there all year round. Any other questions on windows or solar panels?
So going back to the inner glass, are you, I think Scott might have mentioned this, but I'm not sure. The coating, you can actually, they will do, like for these window inserts, they will do the coating on, like if you tell them I want the low E I-89, they'll do that. Or if you tell them you want the low E 180 coat, they'll do that.
Yes and no. What they do is they buy the glass. So they buy, 100 square feet or something of plain glass and 100 square feet of low E272, which is sort of like the middle of the road glass that's most common. So you don't get the choice that you do with the factory made triple glazed windows, where you can literally choose each panel one by one. But for these guys, like I say, it's a job shop. If you really wanted it, they'd probably do it for you. But to get the low E I-89 coating on the inside and the low E 186 on the outside, you have to have 2 sheets of glass. And all they're making in the factory in the glass is 1 sheet of glass. So it's not so easy. I think it's sort of a compromise. I bought the low E272. It's a very good all-rounder. It's not perfect for every location, but it's a very good all-rounder for most people most of the time. And you can't get that on a plastic panel.
Right.
The process for putting the low E coating on is very high temperature, and it would just melt the plastic.
Mhm.
Any more? Let's just take one more question, and then I want to get on to the finance stuff.
Could I,
Yeah, Nicole, go ahead.
can I jump to solar panels a little bit?
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could speak to a little bit of like how much, I didn't see it written, how many panels you need. I don't know, like if you could call it an average house or what, if you have, do most people have enough roof space to accommodate all the needs for a house and air conditioning and things like that? And the second part of that question is like, I'm a client that would be interested in putting them in on the ground in the field, and how does that work more expense wise? Or, I mean, I'm assuming I can have many more panels, which is nice, but and easier to probably to maintain, but
Yeah. Okay. So let me just talk first about sort of typical solar panel arrays and how much you can get on a house. So our house is a flat roof, and we have an array on the roof and an array on the garage. Each one is about 40 panels, and in kilowatts, the one is about 15 kilowatts, and one's about 13 kilowatts, and that is enough. That's more than enough to supply all of our electricity if we didn't have the heat pumps. Now, with the heat pumps, it takes a little bit more than all of that. But for most people, unless you have a lot of shade on your house, if you've got a little bit of shade, it's okay. But most people, if you don't have a lot of dormer windows, which are going to break up the roof so you can't get a lot of solar panels on, if you've got a reasonably open roof, you're going to have about enough power to run your house as it is today, plus having heat pumps. And the bridge too far is probably going to be your house today, plus heat pumps, plus electric vehicles. That's probably going to be too much. But remember, these things like a 3D chess game. If you insulate your house and you improve your windows, and you then you're going to reduce the energy load your house takes. And you can't really get to having enough solar panels on your roof, having enough space on your roof for enough solar panels to get to a carbon footprint of 0, unless you do the insulation in the air, sealing on the windows. Otherwise, you just need such a big roof. It would be, from a practical point of view, impossible to get enough panels on the roof to go 0. So it really is cutting your energy use first. You cut it with insulation and with triple glazed windows. You cut it by heating efficiently with heat pumps and a heat pump hot water tank. And then when you're done with all of that, the average roof that's in reasonable sun without dormer windows will be sufficient to generate enough electricity to go 0 on an average house. That makes sense?
yeah, but when you say like an array is about 40 panels, like what are the size of the panel, and like how many square feet is 40 panels?
So each panel is about 15 square feet, roughly. It's a good number. So 40 panels will be 600 square feet, or roughly a roof that's 20 feet by 30 feet. That is smaller than most people's roofs in Sherburne.
I mean, that's only one side, right? If your roof is like this. Right?
Yes. And of course, if you've got a sloped south-facing roof, that is the best of all. But if you've got an east-facing roof or a west-facing roof or a flat roof, the penalty is only 10%.
Hmm.
So an east-facing roof generates 90% of the electricity of a south-facing roof. This is not widely well understood among solar installers, but it's just that, I mean, they can all calculate these numbers. It comes out of the software they use to do it, but that's the truth. It's only a 10% penalty for an east-facing roof or a west-facing roof. And on one client of mine, they have a like an 1810 farmhouse that is, the axis is north-south. So the slope is east and west. One faces east, one faces west. By putting solar panels on both sides of that roof, we were able to generate them far more power than they could ever have done with a south-facing array.
Hmm.
So east and west facing roofs are fine. Flat roofs like mine have about a 10% penalty, the same as an east facing and a west facing roof. So east facing, west facing, and flat are all about the same, just a 10% penalty from a south facing roof. And even a north facing sloped roof is a 30% penalty from a south facing roof. So a lot of people are surprised about that, but so one client of mine, he's not really a client, he's just someone I've helped. He put an array on a north-facing roof.
And so when you say an array is about 600 square feet, and you say you have two roughly about the same size of those?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying, that people would need 2 times 600 square feet for an average use?
That's probably a little on the large side, but it's in that ballpark. It's not 10 panels. 10 panels is not going to get an average house in Sherburne to net zero. Even after you've done the air sealing and the insulation and the triple glazed windows, you're not going to get there from an average sized roof. But remember, most houses in Sherburne are quite large, and they might be 60 feet long on the roof, and the slope part might be 20 feet. So 60 times 20 is 1,200 square feet. Well, that's a lot of roof space. You probably need, about that. About that would probably get you to about zero on a well-insulated, good windows house in Sherburne. And so you can see it's sort of about right. Now, if you've got a lot of shade, you're not going to get there. If you've got, I don't know, shade on the south side and an open north face, you're probably not going to get there. But it's about right. If you get the insulation done, you get the air sealing done, you get better windows, you can reduce your load enough that using either geothermal or using air source heat pumps, you can get your electricity use down to the point where you can generate it all from solar panels on the roof. That is sort of the magic. And it's been all those technologies got better and better and better that have finally got us this point where solar panels can generate enough power, they can get your house to a zero carbon footprint if, but only if, you do good insulation, you do good air sealing, and you have good windows.
And what about non-roof solar panels?
Like ground mount, you mean, like in fields?
For people who have total shade on the roof. Wow.
Yeah, so they work perfectly well. I've never installed a ground mount solar array myself, so I don't know exactly what the cost comparison is. I believe it costs you more to do a ground mount array than it does to do a roof mounted array. You've got to pay for the racking to put it there. Most people I've met who've considered ground mount have the biggest issue has been aesthetics. It's not been efficiency. A ground mount you can probably make more efficient because you can just get it into an open field somewhere where it's not going to be shaded by trees. So it's good from that point of view. But a lot of people just don't like the look of ground mounted solar panels. And that's why they prefer putting them on the roof, even at a slight penalty in terms of shade or expense to put it up there. But I think it's really an aesthetic choice. If you're okay with it, it's probably going to be a better solution.
And David, quick question. Neighbors, when you're putting up a ground-mounted solar array, do you find that abutters tend to give you more grief?
Aren't you doing the coaching session, Fred?
I'm sorry?
Aren't you doing the coaching session? We're going to deal with skills like irritable neighbors and things like that.
I am, so I'm looking for some help here.
Yeah, so I've never done it, Fred, but the only people I've consulted to who've been considering ground mount have been out in the Berkshires where they've got 15 acres and they're not really bothered about their neighbors. I think in, Sherburne, if you've got 2 acres and you're in a 2-acre neighborhood, I think people are going to complain about it. I mean, people can and will complain about anything in their neighborhood. You all live in Sherburne. I mean, you know this. People get really upset about really minor details. So I think that's an additional hassle factor in ground mounted, which you don't get on roof mounted. But
Well, here's a question for Michael, since he has a connection with the health department. Could you mount ground-mounted solar panels over your septic system? I don't know of any reason why not, as long as you don't bore into the drain field.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has asked it yet, but I wouldn't see, I mean, they generally want the rain. I can't tell how much of a factor is that you want the rain to be able to percolate through the soil or not. I don't know if there's a concern about how the field works, that you don't want to have ridges of it because you basically, but it depends. If you get enough vegetation, it might disperse anyway, as long as you don't get erosion from the edge drip of the panels and it's vegetated. As long as it's probably vegetated underneath, it might spread the water out. But that might be the only thing I could think of immediately, but I don't know if it's come up. I see it if people want to put it in the buffer zone of wetlands. Things like that, which raises all sorts of other issues.
Just one thing you should all know about is if you are a legal farm, and there are many legal farms in Dover. By legal farm, I mean a Chapter 61 registered Massachusetts farm, not like you've got some chickens in the backyard, but a legal farm in Massachusetts. You can get an additional subsidy under the SMART program, which we'll get onto later on in solar panels, additional subsidy for exactly what Scott was talking about, having a dual use agricultural solar array. So you put the solar panels over a field, not a septic field, but over a field, and you graze sheep under the panels or something like that. Or you continue some agricultural use, and then you get an extra subsidy. It's called dual use agricultural something or other. But so there are people in Sherburne who you'll come across who are legal farms, and they
one.
Yeah, there you go. So there are plenty of legal farms, and you have an opportunity to get even greater subsidies for a ground-mounted array, not for a roof-mounted array, but for a ground-mounted array.
Great.
There are big community solar farms that are doing them in cranberry bogs to try to get that kind of extra.
Yeah. So I've reserved a 12,000 kilowatt hour production from a cranberry bog in Falmouth, Massachusetts. So a former cranberry bog. It's now going to be a solar panel field.
Oh, they're not going to do the cranberries at the same time? Mm.
I don't think so. I think they're just doing solar panels, but I'm not totally sure actually, Michael. Anyway, let me suggest we move on. Otherwise, I'm sure we could talk questions all night. But so let me just switch to financing. So for a minute, I'm going to just be talking about how to think about financing and what this is going to do for us. It's a toolkit that allows you to say to a client or help a client answer the question, what should I do? And we talked about in previous calls, is often bewildering. And somehow you've got to sort through with your client, what should I do and what should I not do? Which things make financial sense, which things make no financial sense? And then when you've got to list down to things that make financial sense, you've got to make some priorities. Which ones should I do first? Maybe this homeowner has a budget, they've got a fixed amount of money they're willing to spend, and you've got to decide what you do first. The same tool, discounted cash flow analysis, gets you to both answers. Both which should I do and which should I not do, and which ones should I do first? And that's why it's such a useful technique. Just raise your hand. Did you watch the little video from Sal Khan? Okay. Oh, Fred did. Okay. So if this session doesn't really click for you, I suggest watching it because he's a brilliant teacher. He's one of these people who's incredibly smart and knows all the answers, but he's also very humble in the way he teaches and explains things really well. But let me try it. So I'm going to run a test with all of you guys, all right? And the test is, just imagine you've done some work. You've been doing some gardening at my house, and I owe you $100. I say to you, you've got a choice. Which would you rather have? I'll give you the $100 now, or I'll give it to you in a year's time.
Take it now.
So Cindy says now. Scott says now. Nicole says now.
If it's $100 a year, it would be worth more than.
Well, you could take that $100 now, you could invest it, you could spend it how you want, you could do whatever you want with that $100 right now, but if you have to wait a year for it, it's not really yours until a year.
It would depend on the return on that $100 over the course of a year.
So what would be your option then, Fred? If I gave you the $100 now, what would you do with it during the year?
Well, let's just say I invest it. What am I investing it at?
Okay. And what would be a reasonable number, Fred?
6%.
6%. So
I'm making that up. You tell me.
right, that doesn't matter. It's a number. You're saying, but if I give you $100 a day, you could make it worth, let's say, $105 in a year's time. And $105 in a year's time is more than $100 in a year's time. And that is why almost everyone would prefer to have the money now rather than the money in a year's time. Does that make sense to everyone?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, so most people's intuition gets there because you'd always rather have, you know, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right?
Right.
So now then, so what we're saying is, standing here today, you might be ambivalent about me saying I'll give you $105 in a year's time, or I'll give you $100 today. Am I right?
I would still take it today,
And why would you still take it today, Cindy?
because it's in my hand today.
So
That's why.
right.
Because I don't know if you're gonna go bankrupt next year.
So there's always some risk you might not get paid.
That's
Right.
right.
If you accept from me $105 in a year's time, you've essentially lent me $105. I'm promising to repay it to you in a year's time. So I might go bankrupt. You might never get your $105. So there's always the risk you'll never get paid. In addition to Fred's point about I can invest it and get $105 from $100, that's a separate point. That's called the investment. There's also what banks call credit risk. They lend money to you on a credit card or a mortgage. There's always the risk they won't get repaid. There's always some default, like the default rates on mortgages are very low, less than 1%. The default rates on credit cards are probably 5%. So if you're Chase Manhattan Bank and you're lending money to people, you have to account for 5% of those lenders never paying you back. That's called credit risk, okay? The risk of not getting paid back. A separate idea from the idea of you can invest it and make more money with the money today, okay? Now, for the rest of this session, we're going to assume that I'm the federal government, okay? And there is no credit risk. Why? Because the federal government can print the money, okay? So you're never going to not get paid by the federal government. There is zero credit risk because they've got the printing presses. They can always just print another extra $100 bill and give it to you. So that is what people talk about when they talk about zero risk or risk-free investing. And so that just takes the credit risk thing out of it. So we're not worried anymore about are we going to get paid or are we not going to pay. We're just going to worry about how much money can we make as an investment, okay? So we said $100 a day is equal to $105 in a year's time. And most of us would be sort of ambivalent. We'd say, okay, those are equal now. So what that means is in order to calculate the value today of both $100 today, that's worth $100, and $100 in a year's time, we have to discount the value of $100. Does that make sense? Because the value today is not $100. We know that. We know it's worth less than that. And I'll make it up. It's worth $95 a day. So if the choice is I give you $100 a day or $105 in a year's time, those are equivalent. The present value, the value today is the same of $105 in a year's time versus $100 a day. That means if we want to get today's value of the $105, we have to discount it by that same interest rate. That makes sense. So if go back to the first example. If I give you $100 now or $100 in a year's time, you now have to evaluate those as the same amount of money today. You are going to discount that $100 in a year's time by 5%. So roughly it'll be $95. So you look at these two today, you say the $100 today is worth $100 today. $100 in a year's time is worth $95 today. because I could take that $95 and invest it and get my $100 in a year's time. So the present value, the value today of anything you get in the future is less than if you had that today. Now, if you've all got that, that's it. That's all you need to know, right? All you need to know is that you have to discount a future payment to today in order to evaluate it on the same basis. An apples to apples basis, $100 from now, $100 a year from now is not an apples to apples basis compared to $100 a day. It's $95 a day is the present value of that $100 in a year's time. That is the only thing I'm going to do in these spreadsheets, which I show you. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. I'm going to show you some of the spreadsheets that I use. Hang on. Not sure I've done this right. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, can you see this spreadsheet now?
Yep.
Okay, so this spreadsheet is part of my energy and financial model, but I'm just showing a little piece of it. You do not need to do spreadsheets. You do not need to do these calculations. I'm just showing you how it's done. So here I'm calculating the present value of insulation, because insulation, you pay for it today. See that little green box? Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
Okay, so little green box I'm spending, this is from my house, this is the actual results from my house. I spent $1,000 on insulation. So that's my investment, $1,000 right there. And then what I save is here. Now this is actually calculated from the model, but don't worry about it. So I'm saving $2,900 on my energy bills by installing that $1,000 worth of insulation in my attic and in my basement. Okay, so I spend $1,000 and then I save $2,923 in the first year. Now you'll see below year 2, year 3, year 4, it actually goes up, and it's going up by inflation, which I've got up here at 2%. Okay, so every year my savings get better because the cost of heating oil is going up. So what I then do is the cash flow, which is just the minus the 1,000 plus the savings. So minus 1,000 plus 2,923 is 1,923. And then the same thing all the way down here. And then I do that's each year. And I just add up each year as we go. So we've got the cumulative over the lifetime of this investment. And you can see this is a rather trivial case because it pays for itself so fast that it doesn't even take a year for it to pay back. So this calculation here is the number of years it takes to pay for itself. Did that all make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, now I can't see all your faces, so you have to shout. If something isn't making sense, you have to shout. I can't see if you raise a hand, you have to shout, okay? Now let me just scroll down. You see I've done this for 25 years, you'll see why in a minute. And I'm calculating here the present value. NPV stands for net present value. Present value meaning what's it worth today, and net means you take off the investment and you add all the positive cash flows that are coming from the savings in the future. That is $60,000, which is an enormous amount of money for a $1,000 investment. And the IRR is the return on investment, or 5% in the example we gave, where you get a 5% interest rate on your investment. That in finance terms, it's called IRR, which stands for internal rate of return, but it's just the return on investment. Now that doesn't even calculate, it's giving you an error message here because this is paying for itself so fast, it can't even calculate the IRR. Okay.
So quick question,
Yeah,
the net present value of that $1,000 that you invested is 60,613. That's the net present value.
That's exactly right, Cindy. So what I'm really saying to you is you give me $1,000 and I'll give you $60,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's based on the premise that fuel oil price is going to go down or go up,
2% a year, correct.
even though it was like less than $2 this summer.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when I locked in.
Yeah, and some of these things you can, you can argue, for instance, about what tax rate should you use. These are all savings, so there's no tax. There's no need to tax these savings. But you're right. You can argue about things like inflation. Is price going up? Is it going down? But for something like insulation, is not going to make any difference, Scott. you could put a negative inflation rate in here. It's still going to be a massive payback for itself. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The next one will be a little harder. So there's this pink one here. Can you see the first pink column?
Mhm.
So this is for heat pumps. Now here, my investment was $26,250. That's what I paid to the installer for the heat pumps. And this number here, the 2888, this is calculated from the energy model, which I won't show you tonight, but that's sort of for next time. But this is calculated from the energy savings, from the decrease in the heating oil usage and the increase in electricity. It's the net of those two, and it's saving me $2,888 a year. So in the first year, my cash flow is negative 26,250, positive 2,888. The net amount is 23,362, which I'm out in the first year. Then in the next year, I'm positive 2,900. Then it goes up by 2% every year from then. And then in the column labeled cumulative, you can see how long it takes me to work off the entire investment. And it's about 9 years, I think. Any questions on that? Okay, so now let's go down to the bottom. And you can see this is calculating the net present value at 3%. Now, the 3% here is exactly what Fred was saying, is that's the investment rate you can get. I assume 3% here, Fred. If you can get 5%, that's great. I assume 3% as being sort of a normal type investment at like a treasury bill or a Massachusetts municipal bond, something like that, about 3%. So the net present value of this investment of 26,000 is plus 35. Now remember, because this is net present value, I've already subtracted the value of the investment. So this is the profit I make. This is not just the positive cash flow, this is the net. It's the positive cash flows less the investment. This is a very good investment. I'm making $35,000 over the course of 25 years, and the internal rate of return or return on investment is 13% per year. Pretty good investment, right?
And does this show the break even?
Yes, it does. So over here, I say payback is 8 years. That's the same thing as break even. Break even is the same thing as payback period. And if you look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 8 years of negative cash flow. Sorry, it's 8 years of being in the hole before you become positive in the 9th year, when the savings now exceed the amount you paid for the heat pump in the first place. So anything that has a shorter payback period is going to have what? A higher or a lower IRR?
Wouldn't it have a higher IRR?
Correct. The shorter the payback period,
Yeah.
the higher the IRR. The better the return on investment. Okay, so that's the first example. Now see here, it says add heat pumps at utility rates. So this is assuming you're paying Eversource or National Grid at 23 cents per kilowatt hour. The break even is 8 years. It's still a very good investment. You're making a 13% return on investment. That's after tax. That's much better than you can get in a stock market or bond market investment. Okay, let's switch to the next example. This is now adding a heat pump at solar panel rates.
Mhm.
Okay, now solar panels produce electricity even on a half shaded roof at about 10 to 12 cents per kilowatt hour, less than half of what you're paying Eversource. So look at what happens now. The investment's the same, 26,250, same as over here. The savings now are much higher because I'm only paying 8 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity, whereas over here I'm paying 23. And so the cash flow in each year goes up from almost 3,000 to over 4,000, and it pays for itself in 5 years, not 8 years. So let's go down to the bottom. The net present value is $63,000, almost double what it is paying utility rates, and the IRR is very much higher, 21% per year, than the 13% for doing the heat pump at utility, Eversource, or National Grid rates. And the payback is 5 years. Okay, so 5 years is better than 8 years. The IRR is higher. Now, you may remember in the cheat sheet, I talk about just buying a new heat pump isn't usually the best idea. The best idea is to replace your existing AC units.
Mhm.
And for many people, it is the failure of an AC unit which actually is the entry point for you as a coach. Because that's the point at which they're saying, well, should I buy a heat pump? I've heard of heat pump. Should I buy a heat pump, or should I buy just new AC units to replace my old AC units? Well, I went through the math in that cheat sheet where a replacement. This is taken from my sister-in-law's house. She got a quote for replacing her AC units as $15,000. A quote for replacing her AC units with heat pumps was $23,000, $8,000 more. So you see here, the investment is now $8,000 because all I'm counting here is the additional cost over the cost of having to replace your AC units anyway. The saving here, 288, is the same as it is over here because we're using utility rates, 23 cents per kilowatt hour. And you can see it pays for itself in 2 years. Because now all we're having to pay for is the additional cost of replacing the heat pump, replacing the AC units with heat pumps. So this is why I've been saying that the cheapest way to do this is to replace your heat pumps when your AC units fail. A lot of people, including people in the Heat Smart Alliance, believe you should be adding heat pumps when your furnace fails. It's not true because almost every house in New England and almost every house in Sherburne is not going to be able to give up on their furnace. They need to keep their furnace for those bitterly cold days. So if your furnace fails, you need to replace it. Now, if you're adding a heat pump, you might need to replace it with a smaller unit, but you still need to replace your fossil fuel furnace because there is no house in Sherburne that can be kept at 70 degrees in the middle of winter when it's 0 degrees outside with only a heat pump. So unless you want really upset clients who call you in the middle of winter saying, like Katie or Cindy or Dorothea, why is my house freezing cold? You don't want to be getting those calls. And that's why people need to keep their furnace in place and view a heat pump as a replacement for an AC unit that's failing, not as a replacement for a furnace. Okay, let's go to the fourth example. This is now adding.
David, I've got a question relative to that.
Yeah.
A lot of the heat pump air handlers have supplemental electric heat.
Yeah.
Have you done a model with that arrangement?
Yes. So I don't have a spreadsheet for that here, but I can tell you what the answer is. A lot of the installers will recommend putting in those backup electrical heating units, but they're not paying the bills, Scott. Those backup electric heating elements are producing heat at 23 cents per kilowatt hour of heat in your house. A fossil fuel furnace and natural gas is 5 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Heating oil is 8 cents per kilowatt hour.
But they would only work when the heat pump couldn't keep up with demand.
That is correct. So you'd be paying. I actually did this calculation, Scott, on my own house, where we've kept our fossil fuel furnace and we burn about 200 gallons of heating oil a year still, down from 3,000 before the Fab Four. And for me to have generated that electricity, for me to buy that electricity from Eversource and use it to do backup electrical heating would have cost me $2,000. So it's not impossible. And if you do get there with very good insulation and very good draft sealing, it's not a bad idea to have electric backup heating. But for most people, they're going to get a very nasty shock when they see the electric bills without electric backup heating. And that's why I don't really recommend it. Since you already have your furnace, most people already have their furnace. If their AC unit fails, put in a heat pump instead of an AC unit, keep your fossil fuel furnace, and just let it come on whenever it needs to come on. And accept that you're going to be burning a little bit of fossil fuel. If you've got a client who's an absolute purist and they want to burn no fossil fuel whatsoever, those are the people who are probably going to have to shell out for a geothermal system.
Well, we kind of started out this, well, put in heat pumps when your boiler or your furnace fails. So if you have a client whose boiler or furnace is on its last legs, they may be interested in this kind of thing, but we'd want to discourage them because of the economic realities.
Yeah, I think that's the reality, Scott. If they're a purist and they really want to have a zero carbon footprint, then there's a couple of options. One is to do geothermal. Another option, and then you can get rid of the furnace because the geothermal will be able to heat your house year round. Or you go with that electric backup heating and you buy 100% renewable electricity from your utility. That's just expensive. And I think most people don't realize just how expensive that option is. You can do it and it gets you to a zero carbon footprint, but it's just expensive.
I would back that up because I'm on 100% and it's costing me a lot more than it would if I was doing the Eversource Basic, but I'm getting 86% more electricity.
Right.
than it was.
Yeah, and that's with a house which doesn't have heat pumps, right, Fred?
Yes, that's correct. We're just a basic house.
Right. So, but if you did have heat pumps and that was doing your heating, you'd be using probably twice as much electricity as you currently are, and then it would be a very large increase in your bill. And that's why I think as long as people understand that going in, I'm not going to say no to someone who wants to do that, but I think most people don't realize how much more it's going to cost them, and if they realize how much more it's going to cost them to run electric backup or to run geothermal, they'd probably say, no thanks, I'll stick with natural gas. But that's sort of my take on it. So let me just keep moving on here. So these are 4 heat pump scenarios. Actually, before I move on, so at the bottom of this spreadsheet, you'll see here a financial summary, okay? These are for the 4 heat pump scenarios. Reading down the left, add heat pumps at utility rates, add heat pumps at solar rates, add heat pumps at the additional cost versus replacing AC at utility and then at solar. And here's a summary table of all those numbers I had up above. Now, this is what I'm going to give you if you give me the spreadsheet with the client data, okay? Because once I've got the client data, I can enter it into this spreadsheet, into the energy model, and it spits out the answers. Now, these answers aren't a guarantee, they're not a prediction, but this is going to help you to get the client through this bewildering array of options and say, let's put some numbers on this. Let's be rational about this. Let's get some answers that are going to help you to make the right decisions for your family. And so every time I run this energy model, I get this output for the heat pumps. This carbon footprint summary is not properly wired up, so it's not generating the right answers. But you can see once you've got this data in a spreadsheet, you can start to calculate the current carbon footprint, the cut in the carbon footprint, and you can generate a table like this. But these numbers are not the right numbers. But the numbers in the financial summary, this is for my house. This is what, if I was to add these things today, now of course I did these things 4 years ago, but if I was to add these things today, these would be the financial results on my house. Okay, that's for heat pumps. Now over here to the right, we've got triple glazed windows, TGW. So this is set up the same way. This is what it actually cost me to replace all my windows with triple glazed windows. It was very, very expensive. About just over half of this was the cost of the windows, and just under half of this was the cost of installing them. But it was an overall almost a $200,000 project. I'm only saving about $1,000 a year, plus inflation, 2%, you can see there. So my cash flow is massive and negative, and only a small amount each year. You can see in 25 years, it doesn't even pay for itself, not even close. And this is why you should never rip out perfectly good windows and replace them with triple glazing. It will never pay for itself. But if your windows are broken and you have to replace them anyway, well, then it makes sense, because over here on the right-hand side, this is the additional cost, only $5,000 of buying triple glazed windows compared to double glazed ones. It was a very, very small additional cost. And on this additional cost, the same $1,000 a year in savings, same savings as over here, pays for itself in about 5 years. And on this one, we can't calculate well, we can calculate a net present value. It's large and negative, and the IRR is also large and negative. Over here, in just the additional cost of the triple glazed over the double glazed, it's got a positive net present value, and the IRR is about 26%. So, and then down at the bottom here, this is the table that prints out from doing this, adding the triple glazed windows at full cost and adding the triple glazed windows at the additional cost versus double glazed windows. So these are the financial results that I can very easily generate for you with the inputs that are in that client questionnaire. Almost every one of those questions has a cell in this spreadsheet where it becomes the entry point. And in fact, if I just look over here, this you may recognize, this is the questionnaire I sent to you. So this is why I need to have this in an Excel spreadsheet, not on a piece of paper, because I just cut and paste it into here. Now, what has not been done yet, I've not done it, is wired this up. Okay, so right now I'd have to manually translate all the answers, but my next step is to wire up this client questionnaire to all the inputs in the model and then automatically generate these discounted cash flows and give you good data, not perfect, but good data to help you guide the client through making these decisions.
David, what if the client wanted double hung windows, as we were talking about?
Because I've never done that, I don't have a way to calculate that. I'd have to build a new little piece of the model to do that. I could do that given if I knew what the specs of the windows were, and I could look this up. So I could look up what the draftiness of the windows is and what the insulation values of the windows are. And Scott says he's got it right there. Yeah, so this data is published. So I could do it, I just have not done it. That's not hardwired into this model. I would have to create a little like sub spreadsheet on double hung windows, but it could be done. So I'm not really going to go into this at all, but I just want to show you all these tabs down here. These are the inputs. So this is for insulation. So this is like all of the walls, the windows, the floor, the basement is insulation. Your oil bills or your natural gas bills will go in here. Your electric bill will go in here. Windows. So I've got in here what the R value of the windows is and the number of windows and the average square feet of the windows. All of these are questions I ask in that questionnaire, and they'll eventually be wired in, so the inputs just come straight into these spreadsheets without being manually translated. But this is where I would do it, Nicole. I would have to build a little sub model here for what a double hung window looks like. But at the end of the day, what you really care about is what's the R value of the window. And if it's a new window, it won't be that drafty, but I do have a separate section of the model, which I'm not showing you here, which accounts for draftiness. So I would have to like adjust those two parameters, but it's doable. It's not, I haven't done it, but it's definitely doable to look at a scenario for replacing either double glazed or triple glazed, so double hung windows with either double glazed double hung windows or triple glazed double hung windows. It could be done.
And if I'm right, David, at this point, you're not quite clear how double hung sash windows versus the availability of triple. So if you just look at it from a very basic point of view, if I have a single pane window and I go to double pane, I've made a pretty good advancement. If there's the opportunity for triple, great, but we don't know that yet. Is that true?
Yes, and I think the issue Scott raised earlier, just the weightiness of a triple glazed panel and the thickness of it, I'm not sure it's going to fit into a standard double hung window. So that may be one where the homeowner is going to be better off just adding an insert from the inside. And but
double glaze is not all that bad. I replaced one double hung window and it has a U factor of 0.27.
That's very good. Yeah.
And that equates to an R factor of 3.7. And this is a vinyl window.
Yep.
And vinyl windows used to be way, way on the cheap end of things. And depending on whose you get, this is Matthews Brothers, which is out of Maine. It's a high quality window. And now you can even get them polyurethane foam filled.
Yep.
Because the channels are hollow.
Yep.
Is that a double hung window?
Yes.
Okay.
And Scott, are you looking at the low E coatings on those double glazed windows?
Yes.
Because if you add low E to a double glazed window, you can probably get to about R4, maybe R3.5, something like that. So it's not bad. It's I think my preference is always to do triple glazing because the incremental cost is very small. But if you run into issues like with double hung windows because of the weights or because of the width of the cavity, then there's nothing wrong with going with a good double glazed low E window. That's just a practical constraint for some people.
Does the frame make a big difference in terms of wood versus fiberglass versus metal clad, aluminum clad?
So
So
the
if,
thermodynamics of wood would be better than fiberglass or vinyl.
No, it's not so clear. It used to be that, well, you used to do fiberglass because they could make them thinner framed and you actually gained, there was a net gain. When I replaced my window, when I redid the house 15 years ago, fiberglass, because of the thinner frame and more glass, was actually a better window energy wise back then, even though I didn't go that route. But so it's a combo of things, but I don't know how much with windows these days, how much you worry about the frame material.
yeah, you just don't need to guess because it's written on that tag that Scott was just showing. By law, the window manufacturers have to disclose what the R value is or the U value is in laboratory testing. So, and that's for the whole window. It's not just for the glass in the center. That's the whole window, counting the frame as well. And it's even supposed to, in fact, I think it does include air infiltration. So you get both. So you get two numbers. You get a U factor, which is the R value divided by 1. Sorry, 1 divided by the R value is equal to the U value. So if the R value is 5, the U value is 0.2. Just 1 divided by the other. But then they also have to tell you what the CFM or cubic feet per minute of air infiltration is across that window. So you don't have to guess these days. You just look at that label to tell you how well sealed is the window and how well insulating is that window. So I think that's probably all I wanted to cover on discounted cash flow analysis. If you get the idea that something a year from now is worth less than something today, even if you're guaranteed of getting that, so we're just talking about the investment opportunity there, not about the credit risk or the risk of default or the risk of not getting paid, you've got it. That is the whole basis of discounted cash flow analysis. You just discount all those cash flows, all those savings into the future back to today, so you can look at things on an apples to apples basis. And you don't need to run the spreadsheets. The spreadsheets are there just to simplify the calculations and automate the calculations for you. But if you've got that concept, that is the key thing you need, because now you can compare heat pumps to solar panels. Now you can compare insulation to triple glazed windows, because you can put it all on the same basis, money, and you can compare anything that has a cash flow in the future to today. And this is what allows you to prioritize which things should we do, which things should we not do. And the simple test is if the NPV, the net present value, the present value of all those future cash flows, less the investment, is positive, you should do it. That's what an economist would tell you. That's what a finance expert or an investment expert would tell you. If the NPV is positive, you should do it. You'll be better off doing it than not doing it. Then once you've got the NPVs, you look at 3 or 4 of these things like heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, solar panels. The order in which you do them is from the highest IRR to the lowest IRR. So both of those questions have been answered by this very simple financial tool. You can decide which things you should do and which things you should not do. And as we've seen here, you should not do triple glazed windows if you're looking at the full cost. The only way triple glazed windows make sense is at the additional cost of doing double glazed. So it helps you to look at what should you do, what should you not do. It also helps you to prioritize within those things that have a positive net present value. You do the ones with the highest IRR or the best return on investment or the best bang for the buck first. Now, that's the strict econometric interpretation. You don't have to be so strict, right? You can just, but roughly, that's going to help you and help your client sort through the morass, sort through the bewildering array of options to get to the ones that make sense, make financial sense for this particular client. If that makes sense, let me start. Any questions?
I guess my only question is that if we do have a client that is committed to double hungs, for whatever reason, we're going to need a model for that.
Yeah. So I think let's deal with that when we get to it, Scott. I know how to do that. It's not that hard. It just has to be done. So when you get to a client with double hung windows, let's go through that exact case study, because I want to make sure that I've done the right things in the model. I want to get some of those specs you had for the windows, you get the U factor properly and the cost. But it's very doable, Scott. very doable, just I haven't done it so far. Now, one last thing I want to show you is I've shown you heat pumps, insulation, and triple glazed windows. I have not shown you solar. Now I'm going to show you solar because solar is more complicated. So this little box here in the middle is the output box. This is what you will get from the financial analysis. Gross cost, what the array cost. This is for my, I think this is for my first array, I think. The net cost after the federal tax credit and the state tax credit. This is the net present value of the smart subsidies. CS is connected solutions. CPAC is, I'm not even sure what it stands for. But these are all the subsidies. Taken out the present value, not the actual face value, because some of them come in over time. This is the net cost after those two. After all the subsidies, you got down from $74,000 to $32,000. So a lot of this is covered by the subsidies, almost 2/3 of it, more than half. And then this is the net present value of the array cash flows. This is how much profit I'm going to make on this array. You can see it's a lot of money. And remember, this is net. This is after subtracting the gross cost. So this is making me $83,000 more than the $74,000 I put in up front. The IRR is 15%, pays for itself in 6 years. Now that's the, one other thing here. I've also calculated the cost per kilowatt hour over 25 years because the array manufacturers, the panel manufacturers give you a power guarantee for 25 years. Now the panels will probably last for another 20, 30 years beyond that, but they give you a guarantee for 25 years. So I use 25 years, and this array is producing power for me at 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So a huge discount to the 23. It's an 80% discount to what I'm currently paying. So this black box is what you will get for the analysis of solar panels. I'm now going to show you the scary spreadsheet. This is the spreadsheet it takes to calculate all of that. Because solar panels are complicated because you spend the money in year one, the federal and state tax credits come back on your next tax return. That's the following year. There's a gap between these two numbers. You have to be able to write the check for $74,000, even if you get $20,000 back on your federal and state tax returns the next year. The production goes down each year because the panels sort of wear out over time by about 0.5% a year. This is a bit complicated, but you don't get full credit. You don't get a full 23 cents. You get a bit less than that. It's about 18 cents. This is how much electricity how much I save on electricity bills. This is the smart subsidy. This is after tax because everyone pays taxes. The smart is taxable income. It's about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. That is locked in for 10 years. Once you get it, it's locked in for 10 years. And this is the dollars I get, no inflation adjustment. This is the battery adder because this calculation is assuming I buy a battery at the same time as I buy the array. That's worth an additional 3 cents. This is the additional battery amount. Connected Solutions is a payment Eversource, not the state. Eversource makes to you for renting your battery out in the summertime to discharge to the grid and provide clean power to the grid during times of peak demand. So they're basically renting your battery. They pay you so much money. This is the after-tax amount. And CPAC is a brand new subsidy. I don't know what this is worth yet, so I haven't put anything in. So you can see this gets complicated. This is why you really need to do the net present value, the discounted cash flows, but you come down, sorry, let's go up to the summary table here. So the summary of all of that is a 15% IRR, 6-year payback, 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and a 79% cut in my electric bill, okay? So I'm just showing this to you to show you how we can take something that's actually very complicated analytically and produce a very simple answer that is something I think most people will understand. Any questions on solar panels and discounted cash flow or anything like that?
Okay, so you have not factored in disposal because you expect it to last 50 years?
I think 40 years is what I estimated, but beyond the guaranteed life. But I have not factored in disposal. You are correct though, Scott. To do this properly, you should factor in any end of life cost that you have to pay at the end in order to dispose of it or something like that. I've not done that here.
I just, as someone who is not in business, my eyes just sort of glaze over when I see spreadsheets. And I just don't see, I mean, I may be able to learn it because I'm smart enough to learn it to explain to a client. I don't know, how receptive clients are gonna be, depending on what their interest is. As far as what the spreadsheet part.
Katie, I totally agree, and that's why you will never see this spreadsheet again. I'm
Oh.
sure.
Damn.
Well,
I
if you want to, you're welcome to it. But I've only shown this to you to show you like what's going on behind the scenes. But what you will do with your clients is you will give me that client input spreadsheet. I will use those inputs to generate these outputs for you. And so the only thing you will get, unless you want more, is this summary table that tells you for solar panels what the rough economics is going to look like for your client. And then for
that I can handle.
sorry?
That I can handle.
Yeah, that's all you need to be able to handle, Katie. I'm not trying to turn you guys into investment analysts or discounted cash flow experts. I'm just explaining how this goes up. But
I have a quick question. I have a quick question about something you said earlier, David, on the you were talking about the battery. It was something in your spreadsheet. You said something about I think you said the battery backup and that you're forced to put that back into the grid. Can you elaborate on that?
yeah, so forced to is a bit strong, but the way this works is Eversource pays you a certain amount per year, about $1,000 to $1,250 a year, and that gives them the right to draw down the current, draw down the electricity from stored in your battery at certain times, mostly during the summer, because the summertime is when the peak load is on the grid. When it's a hot day, everyone has the air conditioning on. That's the peak load on the grid. And so Eversource, by using your battery, can reduce its purchases of very expensive power, because the power plants that come onto the grid to make that last few kilowatt hours to generate everyone's AC in the summertime are the highest cost power plants out there. And so Eversource makes money by doing this. By paying to rent your battery, they are avoiding having to pay very high prices for electricity in the peak periods in the summertime. So this is actually very good value for Eversource, for them to pay you to rent your battery. Now, Eversource will never drain your battery if there's a storm coming. So you're never going to be without power when the power goes out. So they're not going to rob you of your battery's usefulness to you to manage those power outages. They look for the storms coming and they do not withdraw electricity from your battery if there's a storm coming. The vast majority of these drawdowns from the battery come in the summertime when there's peak demand on the grid. But that's really what they're paying for. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
So are you not recommending solar without the battery?
No, not at all. No, I can do these calculations both with batteries and without batteries. For some people, batteries are going to make sense. For some people, they're not going to make sense. So you really do need to look at both sets of numbers. And that takes place in this model, but I didn't put it in this summary box here. Because for some people, if basically you have a large solar panel array, about 20 kilowatts, which is a big array, it's about 40 or 50 panels, then your battery is going to be almost free. And I'm currently quoting, I've got a installer quoting me on batteries right now, and I've done these same calculations, and the battery is almost free. It's cheaper than me buying a diesel backup generator. Even though the battery is more upfront, the subsidies are so generous that I'm going to get paid to own that battery.
Do you know, so have you installed anything like this for anyone where they just get the battery backup and they do not do net metering, and rather they just like basically completely live off the grid using solar panels and the battery backup?
I have not. It is possible to do that. I don't really recommend it though. You'd need a very large battery to cover all your wintertime needs. At the time when the solar panels are not producing much power. So you just need a huge battery, and it'd be quite risky because if you did run out a big snowstorm at the same time as you had a power outage, I just don't think, for most people, it's impractical to do that. If you're living in a hut, hut out in the woods in Maine, maybe it's okay. But for anyone living in Sherburne, it's kind of crazy. I mean, we have this electrical grid, you may as well use it. And it's going to be a better solution. You're always going to have the lights on. And if you have a battery and the solar panels, you can recharge your battery from your solar panels even when the grid is down. So that means even on a winter's day, I produce 10 kilowatt hours, 15 kilowatt hours of electricity, even on a winter's day. That's enough to recharge my battery during the day, and I can run the house overnight on 10 kilowatt hours. So that gets me to the same place of being essentially off-grid. I can live off-grid, but only if I use fossil fuel as my heating. I can't use the battery to run my heat pumps. It would be exhausted in 10 minutes. But if I use fossil fuel as my heating, and I only run my emergency panel, my lights, the refrigerator, things like that, then I can essentially live forever during a power outage.
What kind of a battery is that, David?
Great question, Scott. I've been through 3 different batteries. I started with the test, not purchased them. I've been through evaluating them and changed my mind 3 times. I'm now probably going to purchase the Sonnen battery, S-O-N-N-E-N. I started off with a Tesla Powerwall.
Is that lithium ion?
Not sure. I think it's lithium phosphate actually, but I'm not totally sure. Lithium iron phosphate. But the Tesla batteries can't be delivered until May at the earliest, and the subsidies go down with time, so I didn't want to wait. The next one was Generac. Generac requires replacing most of the inverters that I've already got for my solar panels, so that was ruled out. And then the Sonnen one is the best design for that charging while the grid is down. The problem with the Tesla battery is it will not recharge until it's depleted. So imagine you get a power outage at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, you draw down your battery till sunset, and now your battery can't recharge because it's dark. So you really need to have a battery that can recharge and discharge at the same time. And the Tesla ones are not configured to do that. Tesla created their batteries to run cars. Cars discharge or they charge, but not at the same time. And their batteries are not designed to both charge and discharge at the same time. The Sonnen one, which is more expensive per kilowatt hour of storage than the Tesla, charges and discharges at the same time. Now, the reason I'm still interested in going with Sonnen, even though it's more expensive, is because the net present value is still positive, Scott. So,
well, one of the reasons I ask is, you have to facilitate it. Lead acid obviously would be problematic because it's got to be vented and it produces a flammable gas when it's being charged. I don't know about the current battery technology when it comes to facilitation.
Yeah, so I think batteries to me are that's like energy 201. Like the heat pumps installation, the Fab Four is energy 101. If you start getting questions from people about batteries, I'm probably gonna have to put together a separate class on it. We'll come back with a refresher on batteries. That's beyond the scope of doing just the basics here. But more and more people are now starting to think about batteries. They're fed up with Eversource power outages in the wintertime, and they're starting to read about Tesla batteries and how good they are. Maybe they've got a Tesla car. So they're starting to become more familiar with the concepts. But to me, the batteries are all about the finances. It's all about how much it's going to cost, and do I get a positive IRR and a positive net present value given all of the subsidies that now exist? And the short answer is yes. Under the right circumstances, you can now get a high IRR, a positive net present value for buying batteries. But it's complicated. So let's not try to solve that one today. Anyway, we are already running out of time, and we did not do any breakouts tonight. This was, we spent far more time doing the finances stuff, but was this worth it?
Oh, absolutely. It's essential.
Okay, I think it is, but I wanted to hear it from you guys. Okay, so I think that was probably time well spent, but we didn't spend time on the coaching stuff. So I think we should probably just wrap it up here. I've got a couple of items I'm going to work on. I did produce a subsidy cheat sheet. This is the finance. This is like how you think about an investment rather than expense, and how you compare the Fab Four to each other. But I've also put together a cheat sheet on the subsidies, and the subsidies are very significant. They begin with that mass save audit. But I'm going to send it out to you after this session. And then, Fred, do you want to just say a few words about what's coming up?
In the consulting?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. So good question. I wasn't really talk about that, but
No,
no, that's cool. So we have a session on, we're all looking at the technologies and how do those fit and what's the financial IRR and the net present value, et cetera. But there's also a whole issue of how do we talk to people? How do we, I have a way, I'm data oriented, for instance. So if I was going to talk to David about his home, I would come from a source of data. But that might not be really how David processes information. So what we'll be offering is a session on some tools and approaches to consulting. And that's what David and I are working on to try and bring forward. In my past life, I spent a lot of time working with consultants and how to consult. So I'm rewriting all of that stuff so that we can access it and work with it. And I own the content, so I don't have to worry about trademarks or copyrights or anything else. So what we'll offer is a session on how do you connect? And we all have ways we prefer to connect, but what's the way our clients prefer to connect? So I'm data-driven, logical. I like to structure things and say, oh, I'm not going to get to the bottom line until I've spent a lot of time telling you about all the details getting there. But that might not work for somebody. So we'll be building a session on consulting skills, etc. And David and I are currently working on bringing that up to speed. So does that answer your question, David?
yeah, that's exactly what I wanted, Fred. So, so the homework assignment, Fred, is your homework assignment, not mine this week, right?
Assuming I get everything structured well.
Right.
I'm looking back at stuff that I did with corporations, and this is not a corporation.
Right. Right.
I'm rewriting everything that we've done to try and bring it up for all of you to be able to look at and make sense of, etc. And David and I are working on when we can offer that particular training session.
And in the meantime, I'm going to be running these energy models for your clients, you and your clients. So if you've not got me your Excel spreadsheet, please do so, because I cannot do this without having that data input. So for those who've got it to me, I'll be working on that in the next 2 weeks, while Fred's doing the preparation for and then the training next week. So when we come back in 2 weeks' time, I should have these outputs for you so we can start discussing them and saying, okay, this is sort of, this feels like the right kind of program on this house.